Your company is sitting on tons of data. Maybe you're storing it all in an undifferentiated data lake, or maybe you've curated your approach and you're pulling out specific data points. These are different approaches, but if taken to an extreme, neither of them is serving your company. So we're taking a step back today and observing the tech industry from a bird's eye view in order to find the patterns that work and the practices that are proven to lead to success. We're talking with Ben Kepes, a New Zealand-based consultant, angel investor, business owner, and professional board member. He's a modern renaissance man of the tech industry. With his multitude of experiences, he's sharing insights on best practices for data management, how to find patterns that lead to success, and the importance of simple human connection. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to Truth Be Known. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Truth Be Known. We have Ben Kepes here today. Ben, it's so good to have you on the show.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. It's awesome to chat.
That's great. And where are you dialing in from, podcasting in from?
So as you might be able to tell from the slight delay, I'm on the other side, literally, of the world. So I'm down at the bottom of the South Pacific in New Zealand.
That is amazing. One day I would love to visit you in person.
Yeah, it's amazing. 2 years ago, if you'd said there's going to be no tourism, and by the way, you're not going to be able to go to the million different tech conferences that you go to every year, I wouldn't have believed it. But it's amazing what a couple of years can do.
It is, and it's amazing the things that we could just get used to and adapt to so much more quickly than we thought.
Yeah, totally.
So I would love to start off by just learning a little bit more about you. Tell us more about you, how you got started in data, and go from there.
So I do a bunch of different things, but in the context of this, I'm a tech industry analyst, commentator, and I was fortunate to start doing that kind of when cloud was all starting, when SaaS and infrastructure as a service were starting up. So I kind of rode that wave. But my background is business, and so I own and run a bunch of different businesses, and I do a bunch of angel investing and advisory work on the side. And more recently, I've moved into being a professional board member. So I'm on a bunch of large company boards from sort of telco, insurance, health, technology, obviously property, and so really, I guess, varied background. But there are some kind of common points that I'm sure we're going to talk about today.
That is awesome. It's funny. I spent a couple of weeks in New Zealand back in, I think, 2018. Kiwi, I went there to meet with a bunch of tech companies and went in through Kiwi Landing Pad and got to learn all about the sort of tech scene and all of the different small businesses in New Zealand, and was super, super impressed by what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's that's really, my journey has kind of mapped that. So Xero, which is the cloud accounting company that started here and is now global. Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of started talking about SaaS when they started 15 or 16 years ago, and as they rode the wave, I kind of began my journey, and they really sort of reinvented the tech industry in New Zealand. So now there's a bunch of cloud companies here. There's been a bunch of M&A activity. It's, like every country in the world has their own version of Silicon Valley, and everyone spends a lot of time working out a name that would be sufficiently close to Silicon Valley, but not actually. That I'm not so keen on, but it is great to see technology happening down here.
Awesome. I would love to learn more about some of your current roles as a board member, as a consultant, as an analyst. What does it look like? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? How are you using data?
I spend a bunch of my time in board meetings. The reality of being a professional board member is there's all-day board meetings and a lot of reading for that. And I think that what I do is I definitely take the stuff that I learned, or the stuff that I use in my analyst world or in my technology world in order to do that. Because if you think about what a board member or what any exec in an organization does, they spend a bunch of time reading, seeing data, learning data. They have inputs from so many different places, many different people. And what they need to do is they need to kind of take all of that data, munge it up, try and work out some signal from that. So I think that in my mind, anyone that's making decisions with, for big teams and large organizations and long time frames is actually a sort of a physical embodiment of the platforms that today we use en masse to analyze data. And so I think I remember talking to a friend once in the context of angel investing. I've been involved in, I guess, 50 different startups as an angel investor. And we were talking about what is it that makes an angel investor successful or unsuccessful. And his thing, and he's a very, very, very successful investor, his thing was that it simply comes down to pattern matching. You see enough of these companies and you can identify the patterns that predicate success or otherwise. And to me, that is all about data, and it's taking insights from the myriad different data types that we have available to us. And so what's really exciting for me, doing that stuff, I guess, somewhat naturally, is that today that is able to be done en masse by anyone because of this proliferation of data platforms, and also because storage and processing of data is so much cheaper and more accessible. So that's really exciting. Everyone can kind of display and use that type of thinking aided by the technology.
So I feel like I have to ask this question. If it's really just on angel investing about pattern matching and key data signals and data, what sort of patterns should I be looking for?
There's lots of patterns, the way founders talk, the way founders build teams, the way founders go to market, all those sorts of things. I do default to a very simple feeling with my angel investments, which is, can I connect with this founder? Do I think that the problem they're solving is actually a problem? And that's as far as it goes. I think that if you think about, you read TechCrunch and you look at all the companies that are being funded, what are the things, what are the patterns that will predicate success? And clearly the biggest ones that they've been successful before, but that's kind of easy. That's a softball, but it's understanding the market. It is understanding their problem, and it's also understanding both the sort of technology and the business aspects. Because I think the thing that I have observed as an investor, but also as an observer and analyst of the tech space, is that there are so many entrepreneurs who deeply, deeply understand tech, but deeply, deeply don't understand people. And that just doesn't work. You have to understand the people you're selling to, the people that are going to be using your product, and how to connect with individuals. And I'm always fascinated by as I said, I go to lots and lots of conferences, primarily in the US every year, or I did before COVID. And those are all technology conferences. But what is the most valuable thing about those conferences? It's that when you sit down in a bar and have a drink or have a dinner and actually connect to people and get their stories and try and understand what makes them tick as human beings. And I think that's, if there was one pattern that was absolutely, one piece of data that was absolutely applicable to investing, it's that can the founding team actually connect with individuals on that basis?
I think that's such a good point. I've always gotten more out of the conversation over coffee, conversation at a bar, and sitting and doing that and having that as a better learning experience, a better networking, for lack of a better word, sort of future connections always came from that. And you're right. If someone can't connect with you and explain why they're passionate about their product, the problem they're solving, what they're doing, it may be really hard to connect with someone where you're not able to sit down in person and you are trying to do this, to dozens, thousands, millions of people over the internet.
Yeah, and it's really hard. So I think there's a really interesting sort of connection to the data story there, and whether it's investing, whether it's managing and massaging a sales pipeline, whether it's any role within these organizations, maybe other than the hard tech stuff. What the challenge is to take in a range of data types, take as much data as you can. If you think about a person that's running a sales process, they have to take those leads, they have to massage the CRM, they have to identify and qualify the opportunities. But all of that data is the underlying infrastructure on top of which they can build a relationship. So it's really important that people recognize that blend, that leveraging data is very, very important as part of a toolkit that can then augment what you can do as an individual. It doesn't replace what we can do as individuals.
No, absolutely. And I know that you work with a lot of different industries, and you're investing in different industries and on sort of boards across the board. What are some of the differences that you're seeing in working with different industries when it comes to how they work, how they operate, how they use data? Is it really this different?
Yeah, so I'm involved, for example, in the insurance industry. I'm on the board of a health insurance provider, and insurance is high compliance. There's a lot of regulation there, and so in that case, there's a need to spend a lot of time mining data to ensure that we're compliant, that there's no fraud, that our policyholders, are doing the right thing, as opposed to, for example, a tech startup where data is being mined to gain and maintain customers and those sorts of things. So data is being used for different reasons, but fundamentally the great thing about data platforms and the great thing about technology, computer based data mining, is that the infrastructure is the same. It's about getting lots and lots of different pieces of structured and unstructured data into a great big database and deriving some insights from that. And whether that is to identify fraud, whether it's to identify potential customers, whether it's to identify market trends, it's all kind of the same thing. So, I really like this notion of, a great big, whether we call it a data lake or whether we call it a data store or whatever we call it, and the ability to look at that data with different lenses. And I think that's the really exciting thing that we're seeing in our world, the ability for anyone within the business, within an organization, to query data in a way that is meaningful and will derive insights that are meaningful for them.
And it really is about the insights you get from the data more than anything. It's not just how do I have as much information as possible. It's, is this usable? Do I believe this? And what am I getting out of this? And what are the actual business decisions I'm making based on this data?
Yeah, that's right, and it's interesting because if I think about the last 10 years, as an analyst, working with people, go both with customers that are using data, but also watching vendors. We've had this progression from, and it swings backwards and forwards from store everything, put everything in a big undifferentiated data lake, and just you don't know when you'll use it, you don't know when it'll be valuable, just store everything. There's that approach, and then there's the approach that says, we're drowning in data. What you need to do is you need to decide what are the 3, 4, 5, 6 data points and patterns that you want to watch, and store that data, analyze that data, and have a more curated approach towards data. And I think horses for courses. I don't think there's any clarity yet over which is best, but there are organizations that are drowning in data that can derive no insights because there's no curation. And then there's some organizations that are losing value because they're too heavily curated, and there's data that they could have captured and leveraged, but they're not.
What have you seen across some of the companies that you work with or industries where it's just sort of missing the mark on the using the wrong data or not using it at all, or on the flip side, actually doing something meaningful out of insights that they've gained?
Yeah, so if you think about the first one, I think that not leveraging data, the common mistake there, the common pattern that I've seen is that consumer data. And so if you think about a large organization and Clayton Christensen's work, how does innovation happen? If you think about a large organization and its attempts to innovate, or its attempts to be entrepreneurial, often those are stopped because there's no recognition or no appreciation for how customer sentiment is changing. There's too much reliance on committed revenue streams and sunk costs and those sorts of things. And so in that case, I guess the opportunity for data is to really, because there's anecdotal opinion. If I'm in a boardroom or if I'm in an exec meeting and someone says, hey, what we're seeing is that consumers are really demanding red widgets. All our widgets are green, but red is really becoming big, and that's going to be a trend. That's very different from someone coming in and saying, we've crunched the numbers, we've run the data, these are the metrics around different colored widgets. And so that's the opportunity, I think, with more accessible data platforms, analytics, is to be able to actually back up those opinions, back up those sort of emotive conversations with data.
How do you, in working with these companies, start to build that culture of this is a great opinion, this is a great insight, but what's the real data? What's the thing behind it? And it's how do you get people and culture to shift to that?
Yeah, so a good example there. I'm involved with a health organisation. New Zealand, unlike the US, has primarily a public health sector, public health system, and so this is a large public health organisation. It's one of the four largest in the country, and right now in New Zealand, as in many other places, there is a huge focus in health around equity, around is everyone achieving or everyone receiving service equitably? Are they receiving service that is sympathetic to their cultural or other values? And historically, they've very much been two things. It's been within the organisations, it's been sort of opinion based. Outside, around government and those sorts of things, it's been longer term trends, longer term data capture. So you might have a report that says, 2 years ago, this is where equity was for, where health delivery was for underprivileged people or whatever. Increasingly, what we're seeing with that organisation and other organisations like us is that we can capture data. We can take information from the housing, the Department of Housing. We can take information from social welfare records to see who is on unemployment benefit or those sorts of things. We can take information from medical practitioners around health outcomes. We can combine that to see some patterns. We can look at where we're delivering health services and see the impacts in a shorter time frame around equitable or inequitable distribution of health spend to outcomes. And I think that's fascinating. It's as someone who loves technology, it's super exciting. But actually it's the right thing to do for people, because all of a sudden we can, the reality in the health sector is that there is an unlimited demand for money. New drugs are coming out all the time, cost squillions of dollars. There's an insatiable demand. So with a limited resource base, how can we deliver the most impactful outcomes in the most equitable way? And leveraging technology to be able to give us those answers is really empowering. I'm not a clinician. I sit on a board with a couple of other non-clinician board members and 6 or 7 clinicians around the table. And it's always an interesting conversation because, it's always framed in terms of, well, we're doctors, we know that this is so. And what's happening now is we can say, well, actually, the data is telling us this. You may be a doctor, absolutely, you have that clinical knowledge, but the data is suggesting this, that, or that. So it really helps to not balance the score field, but just to make really informed decisions.
That makes a ton of sense. And it's the moving away from anecdotal information and evidence to something that's a lot more quantitative. And with something like healthcare, this could potentially have a big impact on people's lives and well-being.
Yeah, totally. And the great thing is that by inputting quantitative data, it doesn't stop you looking at qualitative data as well. And that's the thing I really like, that comes back to what we talked about before around salespeople, for example. The emotion and the connection is still important, and the quantitative data is part of the toolkit, not a replacement.
Completely. And I heard this, saying recently, which is if sort of your gut and your instinct says no, the answer is no. But if your gut and your instinct says yes, then validate it with data and go through and make sure that this seems like the right thing to do, but let me actually make sure that this feeling is real. And there's the power and the importance of, I have a degree of wisdom, but let's make sure we are not basing massive decisions on a feeling or a feeling alone.
Yeah, it's that's a fantastic way to look at it, and I think data as the tool to be able to say no, or the tool to check one's thinking or one's gut and really assess that is a really interesting lens to look at it from.
One thing I think is really fascinating, we've had a number of guests on the show, and people come from all different backgrounds. And a lot of people start as engineers or have a data science background. And I know you have a more non-traditional background for someone that is the change maker in a lot of places on building a data-driven culture. How did you get involved in this? How did you get to this mindset and sort of build out to where you are today?
Yeah, so my journey, I would say, is absolutely not data driven. It was purely emotion based, and so my modus operandi in life has always been if something looks interesting and fun and whatever, then go for it. And so I've had lots and lots of different vocations. I've worked in lots of different sectors. I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to college. All of that random stuff. And so I would like to think, and maybe it's a little bit gilding the lily, but I'd like to think that actually there was maybe a little bit of data, in terms of my decisions, but probably not. Probably I just took some opportunities. But I think what over the past 10 or 15 years, I've been very fortunate that I've had the freedom, I guess, to take a step back and look at what's happening in the world. So if I think about 15 years ago. Now, 15 years ago, I own and was running, I don't run it anymore, but I still own it, a big apparel manufacturing company. And so I was doing that. And as part of that, I was having to, wrangle software. I was having to use clunky old desktop software. And I started talking to and thinking about companies like Salesforce and like Xero and thinking, well, there has to be a better way. I simply want to be able to access this, the software wherever I am on a browser, not to be tied to a particular desktop computer. And I guess deep down I thought, well, that seems to be the natural way things are going. It seems to me that what's happening is that smaller businesses are able to attain a level of technology, service, or product that was formerly just the purview of large enterprises. And from that, to me, that was quite a weak data point because, back in those early days, 15 years ago, people were saying that, I remember going to conferences where big companies would do their cloud washing and would say that, no, cloud's dangerous and you don't want to go there and all that sort of stuff. But I guess that was a weak signal, but one that I had sufficient sort of emotional certainty on that it was worth going down that path. And 15 years later, look where we've gone. Look how we've developed. So I think again, I use data, albeit in a very informal and ad hoc way, to help defend or not the sort of, I guess, the softer, more emotional decision making processes I have.
And it's interesting on the cloud piece, and there's a bit of sort of foresight that you need to have with it, and a belief of this is where the world is going. Where 15 years ago it was no financial services company is ever going to put their data in the cloud. No healthcare company. Every doctor, the best way to organize information about patients is to put it in a really well organized filing cabinet. And this is what we had. But there's sort of a degree of, well, maybe the data set we're looking at is incorrect. And I think about the same thing for you, where 15 years ago, no one's moving to the cloud and you're sitting there going, okay, you're missing a piece of this. You're missing the real context and insight around this.
I think of three epochs around data. The first was, completely manual and just very much an aside to decision making. We're in an epoch now where people are using data, blindly. It's like the data indicates this, therefore that. And I think the third one, which you really alluded to, is a much more contextual approach to data use, where the algorithms are so good that the algorithms can say, here are the data sets. This is why the analysis from this data set is actually biased. And so I think that that's kind of the next bastion of data analytics will sort of be context based, where the platforms themselves can actually identify when their own insights are poor because of some kind of bias.
And I feel like that's such an interesting, future of where we could go. And right now, where everyone's talking about AI and machine learning, and this is how the robots can do all of this for us. you can't teach robots context right now. And that's a lot harder to sit there and go, this is what the data says, but I didn't tell you to look for these other things. And because I have context and a little bit more insight from experience, now I can interpret this in a very, very different way. And that's, I mean, thankfully, that is keeping lots and lots of data analysts and business people like you and I employed.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know you're of the many, many things, and you are such a well versed entrepreneur. You're co founder and director of Cactus Outdoor. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
A few of us, almost 30 years ago, we were all hikers and climbers and whatever. And it was simply a case of not wanting to go to college, not wanting to have real jobs. And so started a business making super high quality climbing, hiking gear. And that's still going 30 years later. We have we bought we acquired another business a few years ago. So we're now the largest manufacturer of apparel in New Zealand. We still have massively loyal customers. We've got, our gear has been to Everest, has been to the North Pole and South Pole and wherever. But it's really cool. Like, it's really cool to be involved in something. I spend so much of my time in the technology industry, which is super exciting, but it's kind of a little bit ephemeral. It's so great to be involved in a business that makes a physical good. And at the end of the day, I'll be walking down the street and I'll see someone, biking past or walking past wearing a pair of our pants or one of our jackets or whatever. And that's a pretty cool feeling. It's nice.
That really, really is. And I completely agree with you. We don't do anything where I've been working in technology my whole career. I can't touch anything that I make. And the idea of actually having part of your life and part of your business and, part of how you came up being something that you can physically touch and see people wearing and go out and go like, I made this and this went to Everest and this kept someone safe and alive and warm is pretty incredible.
I've got lots and lots of friends, obviously, in the technology industry, and I think that a lot of people are searching for context, meaning, purpose, and for a lot of people, they find that outside of their work, or they convince their employer to do some, whether it's some social good things or some outreach into the community or whatever. But it is really nice when that is right there. That's what we do. What we do is making a product. I think that, like, it's not binary, because clearly, I think about some of my technology friends who are making products that, put people into space or keep people safe in vehicles or whatever. So it's not that it isn't impactful, but it's so much more readily. You can look and touch and feel in my context with apparel, which you can't with technology.
And it's so interesting. It's not a side project or a side passion. This is a big part of how you got into entrepreneurship. And it's so nice to hear that, where it's not always, this is what I do in the technology space and this is what I do just in that. It's I aspire one day to do something that, is something that is a little more tangible, a little more something you see on the street other than a billboard. So we have a sort of a quick decisions part of the show that I'd love to kind of go into. It should be light, fun. Don't overthink anything. And if I ask you to tell me more about climbing Mount Everest and things like that, just go with it. So what's one talent or skill that's not on your resume?
So I'm going to go outside of the box and give you two, because I'm just that sort of guy. I'm a rebel. So talent, I guess, is woodworking and furniture making. So I built my own house and I built all the furniture inside it, which is kind of fun. And skill, not sure about skill, but I run ultra marathons. So I'm one of these people that go and run crazy, ridiculous distances for more longer than a day and stuff. And so between those two things, I find time to get a little bit zen, I guess.
That is impressive. That is impressive. I ran one marathon and got terrible shin splints after, and they weren't my career in running.
Running on the road is really hard. Like, most of my racing is on the trail, so it's a lot easier on the body.
What's your favorite piece of furniture you've ever made?
So I'm a big fan of mid-century Danish design, so all the stuff from the 50s. And so I make stuff that's kind of in that keeping, but I also do a bit of what they call live edge furniture.
Yeah,
You
yes.
get like a slab of wood, and you see sort of like the bark and the edge of the tree, and maybe that's like the tabletop or whatever. So yeah.
Exciting. What is a piece of advice you're going to give that you would give someone in business that's trying to evolve, be a little bit more data driven, but also I love this idea of sort of contextualizing being data driven?
Yeah, so I think that the best decision makers that I've witnessed are ones that can make decisions with their heart and their head. So don't be so quick to go with the data, to go with the data driven insight before you spend some time thinking about the bigger picture. So to me, it's similar to when I'm doing a strategy session with one of the boards I'm on. We'll spend a bunch of time just exploring and thinking and contextualizing and ideating, and then we'll look at the data. And so it's similar to what you talked about before about thinking about emotion, thinking about people, and then letting the data prove or disprove, rather than letting data drive the decision. Data should absolutely be a part of the decision, but let the human factors blossom as well.
Final question. I love advice questions. What advice would you give to the younger version of yourself?
So in terms of vocation, I wouldn't have done anything different. Just explore and do random stuff. I think that one thing that I have been slow to learn is in this hyper-connected world, that the power that we all keep with our voice, and the ability to do good or to do damage. And I've definitely been guilty of, not maliciously, of just saying what I think, whether it's about a technology vendor or a person or an airline or whatever. And so I think being circumspect and thinking a little bit more before we hit send on that tweet. That's definitely something that I wish I'd had someone tell me 10 or 15 years ago, because it can do damage.
I think that is excellent advice for all of us. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully I will get to see you in person one day when the world is in a slightly better global place. And I would love for New Zealand to let me back in, because your country is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, absolutely. You're welcome down here. It's a long way, but we do really good honey. So come on down and get your fill of honey.
Yes, excellent honey and amazing glaciers.
Indeed.
Thanks, Ben.
Truth Be Known is brought to you by Talend. A leader in data integration and data integrity, Talend enables every company to find clarity amidst the chaos. Talend Data Fabric brings together in a single platform all the necessary capabilities that ensure enterprise data is complete, clean, compliant, and readily available to everyone who needs it throughout the organization. Learn more at talend.com. That's TALEND.com.